Chapter 10. He happened to be in the vicinity of asteroids 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and 330. So he began by visiting them, to keep himself busy and to learn something. The first one was inhabited by a king. Wearing purple and ermine, he was sitting on a simple yet majestic throne.
"Ah, here's a subject!"
the king exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince. And the little prince wondered, how can he know who I am if he's never seen me before? He didn't realize that for kings the world is extremely simplified. All men are subjects.
"Approach the throne so I can get a better look at you,"
said the king, very proud of being a king for someone at last. The little prince looked around for a place to sit down, but the planet was covered by the magnificent ermine cloak. So he remained standing, and since he was tired, he yawned.
"It is a violation of etiquette to yawn in a king's presence,"
the monarch told him.
"I forbid you to do so."
"I can't help it," answered the little prince, quite embarrassed. "I've made a long journey, and I haven't had any sleep."
"Then I command you to yawn," said the king. "I haven't seen anyone yawn for years. For me, yawns are a curiosity. Come on, yawn again. It's an order."
"That intimidates me. I can't do it now," said the little prince, blushing deeply.
Well, well," the king replied. "Then I command you to yawn sometimes, and sometimes to—"
He was sputtering a little, and seemed annoyed. For the king insisted that his authority be universally respected. He would tolerate no disobedience, being an absolute monarch. But since he was a kindly man, all his commands were reasonable.
"If I were to command," he would sometimes say, "if I were to command a general to turn into a seagull, and if the general did not obey, that would not be the general's fault. It would be mine."
"May I sit down?" the little prince timidly inquired.
"I command you to sit down,"
the king replied, majestically gathering up the fold of his ermine robe. But the little prince was wondering. The planet was tiny. Over what could the king really reign? "Sire," he ventured, "excuse me for asking."
"I command you to ask,"
the king hastened to say. "Sire, over what do you reign?" "Over everything," the king answered, with great simplicity. "Over everything?" With a discreet gesture, the king pointed to his planet, to the other planets, and to the stars. "Over all that?" asked the little prince. "Over all that," the king answered. For not only was he an absolute monarch, but a universal monarch as well. "And do the stars obey you?" "Of course," the king replied. "They obey immediately. I tolerate no insubordination." Such power amazed the little prince. If he had wielded it himself, he could have watched not 44, but 72, or even 100, or even 200 sunsets on the same day without ever having to move his chair. And since he was feeling rather sad on account of remembering his own little planet which he had forsaken, he ventured to ask a favor of the king. I'd like to see a sunset. Do me a favor, your majesty. Command the sun to set."
"If I commanded a general to fly from one flower to the next like a butterfly, or to write a tragedy, or to turn into a seagull, and if the general did not carry out my command, which of us would be in the wrong, the general or me?"
"You would be," said the little prince quite firmly.
"Exactly. One must command from each what each can perform," the king went on. "Authority is based first upon reason. If you command your subjects to jump in the ocean, there will be a revolution. I am entitled to command obedience because my orders are reasonable."
"Then my sunset?" insisted the little prince, who never let go of a question once he had asked it.
"You shall have your sunset. I shall command it. But I shall wait, according to my science of government, until conditions are favorable."
"And when will that be?" inquired the little prince.
"Well, well," replied the king, first consulting a large calendar. "Well, well, that will be that will be tonight around 7:40, and you'll see how well I am obeyed."
The little prince yawned. He was regretting his lost sunset. And besides, he was already growing a little bored. "I have nothing further to do here," he told the king. "I'm going to be on my way."
"Do not leave," answered the king, who was so proud of having a subject. "Do not leave. I shall make you my minister."
"A minister of what?"
Of justice."
"But there's no one here to judge."
"You never know," the king told him. "I have not yet explored the whole of my realm. I am very old. I have no room for a carriage, and it wearies me to walk."
"Oh, but I've already seen for myself," said the little prince, leaning forward to glance one more time at the other side of the planet. There's no one over there either."
"Then you shall pass judgment on yourself," the king answered. "That is the hardest thing of all. It is much harder for you to judge yourself than to judge others. If you succeed at judging yourself, it's because you are a truly wise man."
"But I can judge myself anywhere," said the little prince. "I don't need to live here."
"Well, well," the king said, "I have good reason to believe that there is an old rat living somewhere on my planet. I hear him at night. You could judge that old rat. From time to time you will condemn him to death. That way his life will depend on your justice. But you'll only pardon him each time for economy's sake. There's only one rat."
I don't like condemning anyone to death," the little prince said. "And now I think I'll be on my way."
"No," said the king.
The little prince, having completed his preparations, had no desire to aggrieve the old monarch. If your majesty desires to be promptly obeyed, he should give me a reasonable command. He might command me, for instance, to leave before this minute is up. It seems to me that conditions are favorable." The king having made no answer, the little prince hesitated at first, and then, with a sigh, took his leave.
I make you my ambassador!" the king hastily shouted after him.
He had a great air of authority. "Grown-ups are so strange," the little prince said to himself as he went on his way. Chapter 11. The second planet was inhabited by a very vain man. "Ah, a visit from an admirer," he exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince, still at some distance. To vain men, all other people are admirers. "Hello," said the little prince. "That's a funny hat you're wearing."
"It's for answering acclamations," the very vain man replied. "Unfortunately, no one ever comes this way."
Is that so?" said the little prince, who did not understand what the vain man was talking about.
"Clap your hands," directed the man.
The little prince clapped his hands, and the vain man tipped his hat in modest acknowledgment. "This is more entertaining than the visit with the king," the little prince said to himself, and he continued clapping. The very vain man continued tipping his hat in acknowledgment. After 5 minutes of this exercise, the little prince tired of the game's monotony.
And
what would make the hat fall off?" he asked. But the vain man did not hear him. Vain men never hear anything but praise.
"Do you really admire me a great deal?"
he asked the little prince. What does it mean, admire?"
"To admire means to acknowledge that I am the handsomest, the best dressed, the richest, and the most intelligent man on the planet."
"But you're the only man on your planet." Do me this favor. Admire me all the same." I admire you," said the little prince, with a little shrug of his shoulders. "But what is there about my admiration that interests you so much?" And the little prince went on his way. Grown-ups are certainly very strange," he said to himself as he continued his journey. Chapter 12. The next planet was inhabited by a drunkard. This visit was a very brief one, but it plunged the little prince into a deep depression. "What are you doing there?" he asked the drunkard, whom he found in silence before a collection of empty bottles and a collection of full ones. "Drinking," replied the drunkard, with a gloomy expression. "Why are you drinking?" the little prince asked. "To forget," replied the drunkard. "To forget what?" inquired the little prince, who was already feeling sorry for him. "To forget that I'm ashamed," confessed the drunkard, hanging his head. What are you ashamed of?" inquired the little prince, who wanted to help. "Of drinking," concluded the drunkard, withdrawing to silence for good. And the little prince went on his way, puzzled. "Grown-ups are certainly very, very strange," he said to himself as he continued on his journey. Chapter 13. The fourth planet belonged to a businessman. This person was so busy that he didn't even raise his head when the little prince arrived. "Hello," said the little prince. "Your cigarette's gone out."
3 and 2 make 5, 5 and 7, 12, 12 and 3, 15, hello, 15 and 7, 22, 22 and 6, 28, 2, time to light it again, 26 and 5, 31, phew, that amounts to 501,622,731.
500 million what?
Oh, you're still there? 501 million, I don't remember, I have so much work to do, I'm a serious man, I can't be bothered with trifles, 2 and 5, 7.
501 million what?
Repeated the little prince, who had never in his life let go of a question once he had asked it. The businessman raised his head. For the 54 years I've inhabited this planet, I've been interrupted only 3 times. The first time was 22 years ago, and I was interrupted by a beetle that had fallen onto my desk from God knows where. It made a terrible noise, and I made 4 mistakes in my calculations. The second time was 11 years ago, when I was interrupted by a fit of rheumatism. I don't get enough exercise. I haven't had time to take strolls. I'm a serious person. The third time is right now. Where was I? 501 million?
Million what?
The businessman realized that he had no hope of being left in peace. Oh, of those little things you sometimes see in the sky.
Flies?
No, those little shiny things.
Bees?
No, those little golden things that make lazy people daydream. Now, I'm a serious person. I have no time for daydreaming.
Ah, you mean the stars?
Yes, that's it, stars.
And what do you do with 500 million stars?
501,622,731. I'm a serious person, and I'm accurate.
And what do you do with those stars?
What do I do with them?
Yes.
Nothing. I own them.
You own the stars?
Yes.
But I've already seen a king who...
Kings don't own. They reign over. It's quite different.
And what good does owning the stars do you?
It does me the good of being rich.
And what good does it do you to be rich?
It lets me buy other stars if somebody discovers them.
The little prince said to himself, "This man argues a little like my drunkard." Nevertheless, he asked more questions. How can someone own the stars?
To whom do they belong? Retorted the businessman grumpily.
I don't know. To nobody.
Then they belong to me, because I thought of it first.
And that's all it takes?
Of course. When you find a diamond that belongs to nobody in particular, then it's yours. When you find an island that belongs to nobody in particular, it's yours. When you're the first person to have an idea, you patent it, and it's yours. Now, I own the stars, since no one before me thought of ever owning them.
That's true enough,
Little Prince said.
And what do you do with them?
I manage them. I count them and then count them again, the businessman said. It's difficult work, but I'm a serious person.
The little prince was still not satisfied. If I own a scarf, I can tie it around my neck and take it away. If I own a flower, I can pick it and take it away. But you can't pick the stars."
"No, but I can put them in the bank."
"What does that mean?"
"That means that I can write the number of my stars on a slip of paper, and then I lock the slip of paper in a drawer."
"And that's all?"
"Well, that's enough."
"How amusing," thought the little prince. "And even poetic, but not very serious." The little prince had very different ideas about serious things from those of the grown-ups. "I own a flower myself," he continued, "which I water every day. I own 3 volcanoes, which I rake out every week. I even rake out the extinct one. You never know. So it's of some use to my volcanoes, and it's useful to my flower that I own them. But you're not very useful to the stars." The businessman opened his mouth, but found nothing to say in reply, and the little prince went on his way. "Grown-ups are certainly quite extraordinary," was all he could say to himself as he continued on his journey. Chapter 14. The 5th planet was very strange. It was the smallest of all. There was just enough room for a street lamp and a lamplighter. The little prince couldn't quite understand what use a street lamp and a lamplighter could be up there in the sky, on a planet without any people and not even a single house. However, he said to himself, "It's quite possible that this man is absurd, but he's less absurd than the king, the very vain man, the businessman, and the drunkard. At least his work has some meaning. When he lights his lamp, it's as if he's bringing one more star to life, or one more flower. When he puts out his lamp, that sends the flower or the star to sleep, which is a fine occupation, and therefore truly useful." When the little prince reached this planet, he greeted the lamplighter respectfully. "Good morning. Why have you just put out your lamp?"
"Orders," the lamplighter answered. "Good morning."
"What orders are those?"
"To put out my street lamp. Good evening." And he lit his lamp again.
"But why have you just lit your lamp again?"
"Orders."
"I don't understand," said the little prince.
"There's nothing to understand," said the lamplighter. "Orders are orders. Good morning." And he put out his lamp. Then he wiped his forehead with a red checkered handkerchief. "It's a terrible job I have. It used to be reasonable enough. I put the lamp out in the morning and lit it after dark. I had the rest of the day for my own affairs, and the rest of the night for sleeping."
"And since then orders have changed?"
"Orders haven't changed," the lamplighter said. "That's just the trouble. Year by year the planet is turning faster and faster, and the orders haven't changed."
Which means?
"Which means that now that the planet revolves once a minute, I don't have an instant's rest. I light my lamp and turn it out once every minute."
"That's funny. Your days here are 1 minute long."
"It's not funny at all," the lamplighter said. "You and I have been talking to each other for a month."
"A month?"
"Yes, 30 minutes, 30 days. Good evening." And he lit his lamp.
The little prince watched him, growing fonder and fonder of this lamplighter who was so faithful to orders. He remembered certain sunsets that he himself used to follow in other days, merely by shifting his chair. He wanted to help his friend. "You know, I can show you a way to take a rest whenever you want to."
"I always want to rest,"
the lamplighter said, for it was possible to be faithful and lazy at the same time. The little prince continued. "Your planet is so small that you walk around it in 3 strides. All you have to do is walk more slowly, and you'll always be in the sun. When you want to take a rest, just walk, and the day will last as long as you want it to."
"What good does that do me?" the lamplighter said, "when the one thing I want in life is to sleep?"
"Then you're out of luck," said the little prince.
"I am," said the lamplighter. "Good morning." And he put out his lamp.
"Now that man," the little prince said to himself as he continued on his journey, "that man would be despised by all the others, by the king, by the very vain man, by the drunkard, by the businessman. Yet he's the only one who doesn't strike me as ridiculous. Perhaps it's because he's thinking of something besides himself."
He heaved a sigh of regret and said to himself again,
"That man is the only one I might have made as my friend. But his planet is really too small. There's not room for two."
What the little prince dared not admit was that he most regretted leaving that planet because it was blessed with 1,440 sunsets every 24 hours. Chapter 15. The sixth planet was 10 times bigger than the last. It was inhabited by an old gentleman who wrote enormous books. "Ah, here comes an explorer!" he exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince, who was feeling a little winded, and sat down on the desk. He had already traveled so much and so far. "Where do you come from?" the old gentleman asked him.
What's that big book?" asked the little prince. "What do you do with it?"
"I'm a geographer," the old gentleman answered.
"And what is a geographer?"
"A scholar who knows where the seas are, and the rivers, the cities, the mountains, and the deserts."
"That is very interesting," the little prince said. "Here at last is someone who has a real profession."
And he gazed around him at the geographer's planet. He had never seen a planet so majestic.
"Your planet is very beautiful," he said. "Does it have any oceans?"
"Oh, I couldn't say," said the geographer.
"Oh,"
the little prince was disappointed.
"And mountains?"
"I couldn't say," said the geographer.
"And cities and rivers and deserts?"
"I couldn't tell you that either," the geographer said.
"But you're a geographer."
"That's right," said the geographer. "But I'm not an explorer. There's not one explorer on my planet. A geographer doesn't go out to describe cities, rivers, mountains, seas, oceans, and deserts. A geographer's too important to go wandering about. He never leaves his study, but he receives the explorers there. He questions them, and he writes down what they remember. And if the memories of one of the explorers seem interesting to him, then the geographer conducts an inquiry into that explorer's moral character."
"Why is that?"
"Because an explorer who told lies would cause disasters in the geography books, as would an explorer who drank too much."
"Why is that?"
the little prince asked again. "'Cause drunkards see double, and the geographer would write down 2 mountains when there's only one."
"I know someone," said the little prince, "who would be a bad explorer."
"Possibly. Well, when the explorer's moral character seems to be a good one, an investigation is made into his discovery."
"By going to see it?"
"No, that would be too complicated. But the explorer is required to furnish proofs. For instance, if he claims to have discovered a large mountain, he is required to bring it back large stones from it." The geographer suddenly grew excited. "But you come from very far away. You're an explorer. You must describe your planet for me." And the geographer, having opened his logbook, sharpened his pencil. Explorers' reports are first recorded in pencil. Ink is only used after proofs have been furnished. "Well," said the geographer expectantly.
"Oh, where I live," said the little prince, "is not very interesting. It's so small. I have 3 volcanoes, 2 active and 1 extinct, but you never know."
"You never know," said the geographer.
"I also have a flower."
"We don't record flowers," the geographer said.
"Why not? It's the prettiest thing."
"'Cause flowers are ephemeral."
What does ephemeral mean?"
"Geographies," said the geographer, "are the finest books of all. They never go out of fashion. It's extremely rare for a mountain to change position. It's extremely rare for an ocean to be drained of its water. We write eternal things."
"But extinct volcanoes can come back to life," the little prince interrupted. "What does ephemeral mean?"
Whether volcanoes are extinct or active comes down to the very same thing for us, said the geographer. For us, what counts is the mountain. That doesn't change.
But what does ephemeral mean? Repeated the little prince, who had never in all his life let go of a question once he had asked it.
It means which is threatened by imminent disappearance.
Is my flower threatened by imminent disappearance?
Of course.
My flower is ephemeral, the little prince said to himself, and she has only 4 thorns with which to defend herself against the world, and I have left her all alone where I live. That was his first impulse of regret. But he plucked up his courage again. Where would you advise me to visit? He asked.
The planet Earth, the geographer answered. It has a good reputation.
And the little prince went on his way, thinking about his flower. Chapter 16. The 7th planet, then, was the Earth. The Earth is not just another planet. It contains 111 kings, including, of course, the African kings, 7,000 geographers, 900,000 businessmen, 7.5 million drunkards, 311 million vain men, in other words, about 2 billion grown-ups. To give you a notion of the Earth's dimensions, I can tell you that before the invention of electricity, it was necessary to maintain, over the whole of 6 continents, a veritable army of 462,511 lamplighters. Seen from some distance, this made a splendid effect. The movements of this army were ordered like those of a ballet. First came the turn of the lamplighters of New Zealand and Australia. Then these, having lit their street lamps, would go home to sleep. Next it would be the turn of the lamplighters in China and Siberia, and they would perform their steps in the lamplighters' ballet, and then they too would vanish into the wings. Then came the turn of the lamplighters in Russia and India, then those of Africa and Europe, then those of South America and of North America. And they never missed their cues for their appearance on stage. It was awe-inspiring. Only the lamplighter of the single street lamp in the North Pole and his colleague of the single street lamp at the South Pole led carefree, idle lives. They worked twice a year. Chapter 17. Trying to be witty leads to lying, more or less. What I just told you about the lamplighters isn't completely true, and I risk giving a false idea of our planet to those who don't know it. Men occupy very little space on Earth. If the 2 billion inhabitants of the globe were to stand close together, as they might for some big public event, they would easily fit into a city block that was 20 miles long and 20 miles wide. You could crowd all of humanity onto the smallest Pacific islet. Grown-ups, of course, won't believe you. They're convinced they take up much more room. They consider themselves as important as the baobabs. So you should advise them to make their own calculations. They love numbers, and they'll enjoy it. But don't waste your time on this extra task. It's unnecessary. Trust me. So once he reached Earth, the little prince was quite surprised not to see anyone. He was beginning to fear that he had come to the wrong planet, when a moon-colored loop uncoiled on the sand. "Good evening," the little prince said, just in case. "Good evening," said the snake. What planet have I landed on?" asked the little prince. "On the planet Earth, in Africa," the snake replied. "Ah, and are there no people on Earth?" "It's the desert here. There are no people in the desert. Earth is very big," said the snake. The little prince sat down on a rock and looked up in the sky. "I wonder," he said, "if the stars are lit up so that each of us can find his own someday. Look at my planet. It's just overhead, but so far away." "It's lovely," the snake said. "What have you come to Earth for?" I'm having difficulties with the flower," the little prince said. "Ah," said the snake, and they were both silent. "Where are the people?" The little prince finally resumed the conversation. "It's a little lonely in the desert." "It's also lonely with people," said the snake. The little prince looked at the snake for a long time. "You're a funny creature," he said at last. "No thicker than a finger." "But I'm more powerful than a king's finger," the snake said. The little prince smiled. "You're not very powerful. You don't even have feet. You couldn't travel very far." "I can take you further than a ship," the snake said. He coiled around the little prince's ankle like a golden bracelet. "Anyone I touch, I send back to the land from which he came," the snake went on. "But you're innocent, and you come from a star." The little prince made no reply. "I feel sorry for you, being so weak on this granite earth," said the snake. "I can help you someday, if you grow too homesick for your planet. I can—" "Oh, I understand just what you mean," said the little prince. "But why do you always speak in riddles?" "I solve them all," said the snake. And they were both silent. Chapter 18. The little prince crossed the desert and encountered only one flower, a flower with 3 petals, a flower of no consequence. "Good morning," said the little prince. "Good morning," said the flower. "Where are the people?" the little prince inquired politely. The flower had one day seen a caravan passing. "People? There are 6 or 7 of them, I believe, in existence. I caught sight of them years ago. But you never know where to find them. The wind blows them away. They have no roots, which hampers them a good deal." "Goodbye," said the little prince. "Goodbye," said the flower. Chapter 19. The little prince climbed a high mountain. The only mountains he had ever known were the 3 volcanoes, which came up to his knee. And he used the extinct volcano as a footstool. "From a mountain as high as this one," he said to himself, "I'll get a view of the whole planet and all the people on it." But he saw nothing but rocky peaks as sharp as needles. "Hello," he said, just in case. "Hello, hello, hello," the echo answered. "Who are you?" asked the little prince. "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" the echo answered. "Let's be friends. I'm lonely," he said. "I'm lonely, I'm lonely, I'm lonely," the echo answered. "What a peculiar planet," he thought. "It's all dry and sharp and hard, and people here have no imagination. They repeat whatever you say to them. Where I live, I had a flower. She always spoke first."